Anyway, just want to say welcome to everybody and thank you all so much for taking the time to be with us tonight. This is our second town hall meeting for the Keystone Party of Manitoba. And we are excited to share this time with you guys tonight and really, truly appreciate everybody who's taken the time to be here tonight and to hear from our guests tonight. Just if anybody's not familiar with me, my name is Mike Sitko. I'm from Brandon, Manitoba. And I serve together with several other people as part of the steering committee for the Keystone Party of Manitoba. And tonight we also have with us several of our Keystone Steering Party committee members, as well as our interim party leader, who you see up here in the corner with me here, Kevin. And last week we were able to introduce Kevin, and Kevin shared a little bit of his heart and some of the details of who we are as a party and how we kind of got started. And this week, as promised, we want to move into some of the foundations of the party in talking about our party constitution and our guiding principles and how all of that kind of works together. And an instrumental part of the crafting and the creation of these documents has been a man by the name of John Felstead, who you all see down here in the pin to the main screen here with us, with Kevin and I. And John has just been an invaluable resource to us in helping us to mold and shape and craft the language and to understand a lot of the ins and outs to politics and understanding the purposes and intent behind guiding principles and constitutions. And he came along as we had got some of those products developed and has helped us to tweak those things and to fine tune them. And we're just so grateful for his wisdom, his expertise, and all of the knowledge and skill set that he brings to the table from the many years of service he has provided to Manitoba and to many political persuasions over the years here as he's served in helping with both federal and provincial politics. And so we just want to introduce John tonight. And John, you feel free to just give us a little bit of a history about yourself. And we're going to talk tonight about the Constitution, the guiding principles, and some of the foundations of the party. And anybody, same as last week, if you weren't here with us last week, just let you know, we will be having a time for a Q&A. We're going to try to keep the meeting in its entirety to 60 minutes. And so we want to respect your time. And so we're going to let John have about half an hour here. And then we'll go into some Q&A. So if you have questions that come up as a result of some of the things that John's saying, or just questions in general, feel free to fire them into the chat. And we have some questions that were sent to us ahead of time via email. And so we will touch on some of those as well. But anyway, tonight we just want to welcome you, John. Thanks so much for being with us. And please share from your heart. And excited to hear what you have to say.
Good evening, all. And by way of introduction, I got involved in politics back about 1960 when I formally joined the Federal Conservative Party. And I've been a supporter and activist of principled conservatism since. That's a few more years than I care to acknowledge, but that's the way it is. I've worked for political parties at all three levels of government: provincial, federal, municipal, depending on where I was. I worked on political campaigns in Alberta, Ontario, and Manitoba. At a riding level, I've held every position that there is on an association board for more years than I would care to acknowledge. And I've been involved in numerous election campaigns, federal and provincial, again in Alberta, in Ontario, and here in Manitoba. I've acted as campaign manager, I've acted as financial agent, I've pretty much been through the mill. I became involved with the Keystone group some months ago when I sort of came into being following the Glover campaign here in Manitoba. And initially the group that is shepherding this organization provided me with copies of the materials that they had put together. And I have to tell you, I was completely impressed by the material that they had gathered during the past 2 years or so, and all the different aspects that they had considered and put together. It was eye-catching. It was, in my mind, the right approach to building a grassroots party. I agreed to come aboard as a mentor and advisor to the group. That's the capacity that I've acted in. The notion that I wrote the Constitution is quite long. I helped the group to put it in sequence that flowed, put it in language that is easily understood, and sequence things so that they click together. But all of the original work was done by the steering committee. One of the key elements of our Constitution is the statement of principles. And the statements of principles took some time to put together because it is the foundation of a grassroots party. If we don't have a series of principles that guide us, we stand for nothing. And unfortunately, that's why we're having so much difficulty with the legacy parties that exist today. And that by and large, they've jettisoned principles for expediency and are motivated by whatever they think will appeal to some voters rather than what's the best thing for Canada or Manitoba, as the case may be. The concept of building a party where we empower the members to actually run the party is quite risky. It's one of the reasons why those of you that asked to receive a copy of the Constitution will see that it's in draft form. And it will remain in draft form until we're in a position to hold a convention and have the members approve our policy documents as they will have been created by that time, and the Constitution itself. Until that happens, the document is open to change. We may hear from constituency associations that feel with good reason they would like to see amendments, and provided they have broader support from the districts and from the provincial council, we have to take them into consideration. And some of those points will no doubt be raised at our first convention, where members will decide which direction they want to take. But ultimately, the Constitution and the party belongs to the members. And we'll get more into the detail of how that works. I don't have a lot to say other than the objective of the party is to empower members at the constituency level. And the group of volunteers that gets together and forms an association, which the party in turn can recognize, will be the driving force behind the Keystone Party. It provides the means for any member of the party to have a voice in the policies that are adopted by the party. Again, one of the standing rules of the organization is that our policy direction must be consistent with the principles we are adopting. That becomes our fail-safe and why we're willing to take the risks of empowering the constituencies rather than working on a top-down basis. We firmly believe that we underrate and undervalue the common sense of the common people. And given the opportunity, they can build a better government than the various people who bill themselves as experts in one fashion or another and advise our current political parties and governments. To be successful, we have to remain tuned in to the people on the ground, the people who pay the taxes, the people who carry the brunt of bad decisions. And the best way to do that is give them a voice in their governance. Kind of cover the ground.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. John, just wonder, a couple people were just saying they're having a difficult time hearing you. Can you move your mic just a little bit closer to your mouth there?
All right.
Right on. And then
I'll clear my throat here for a second. Never have been much of a public speaker.
It's no problem. You're doing excellent. Awesome. Well, hey, why don't we just crack into a few questions, because I'm sure that's going to just open some stuff up as well. And I think that we'd be able to glean some really great knowledge from you in that perspective. So for a starting question here, as a member of the Keystone Party, what is a different way from what our regular parties operate that I can interact with my MLA and my party constituency to have my voice heard?
Well, there are two basic ways. First, within our Constitution, the representative, whether that representative is a candidate for office or an elected member, is automatically part of the constituency board of directors. And that is to encourage our elected representatives to have an ongoing conversation with the party members in his or her district. The second way is that any member can make a proposal for a policy amendment or a new policy for that matter and present it to his constituency association. If the association deems that this is something that we should look at, and bearing in mind that it should meet with our statements of principles, then from there, he would refer it to a district council. We've divided the province up into 14 districts consistent with the federal ridings. The reason we used federal ridings as outline for our districts is fairly simple. The federal system requires roughly the same number of electors in each electoral district. Now, it's not exact, but as close as we're going to come to any other means of dividing into districts. It also limits the number of people that we have sitting on our provincial board of directors. Because the concept is that down the road, as constituencies come aboard, they group themselves into districts. And the next step for that resolution would be to go to the district board and present it there. And if the resolution then receives support at district level, it moves up to the provincial council level. And the provincial council is given fairly broad powers to make recommendations to the board of directors or to the caucus, depending on what the subject matter of the resolution is, for consideration in how they operate. The provincial council can also put in interim policies or amendments to the Constitution, for that matter, that if we run into something that really needs attention, they can approve an interim resolution that will stand until the next convention, when it will be approved or amended by members or their delegates at convention.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds really good. One of the questions here, I think you answered this in what you just said, but one of the questions is, will the MLA be allowed to hold a position in the local constituency association?
Yes, they are an ex officio member of the association that they belong to. We feel that it's terribly important to maintain the communication between our representatives and the constituencies that come from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that would be a big difference between how our local, our legacy parties operate right now and how we're proposing to operate. Isn't that right, John?
Well, essentially, the legacy parties get involved with their members only during a general election or a leadership race. Once the election is over or the leadership race is over, you don't hear from them or get communications from them, any meaningful communications from them, until the next general election or leadership race. More importantly, you have no means of accessing the party executives. If you have a suggestion for improvement or a way to do things better.
Yeah, and that's fairly significant when you begin to think about, when you talk about grassroots. This is true grassroots. You're maintaining connection with the people in their constituencies throughout the 4 years of a government is what you're proposing, actually.
Well, it's a little bit more than that, because the board of directors is comprised of representatives that are elected at the district level. So the board of directors isn't a bunch of outsiders or people that form the party. And keep in mind that the committee that's putting this all together has, in effect, said that and understands that they're going to be replaced by member representatives, that the board of directors is answerable to the district councils and in turn to their individual constituencies. The other point that I need to make is that I mentioned the Manitoba Council. Well, the council is comprised of the presidents of all of the riding associations. So these people are going to be completely aware of everything that's happening within the party, and they're acting in the best interests of Manitobans as a whole, because every district, no matter what corner of the province you get into, is represented. That doesn't happen in a traditional political party.
Wow. Yeah, that's revolutionary. Well, on that topic, what since you bring up the idea of the provincial council, why don't we just talk a little bit about that and the theory behind how that would work in the terms of how, if the Keystone Party was to form government, what would be the key role that the provincial council would play? And maybe we can touch on as well, and as kind of a part two to that, what would be the role that the district associations would play during a 4-year tenure if the Keystone Party was to form government?
Okay, let's let's tackle those one at a time. The provincial council gets involved a lot, and that during candidate selection process, they work with and assist the constituency association in the selection of candidates. Now that mostly comes down to having to do the background work on financials, and each prospective candidate has to give the provincial council the authority to do a credit, and in effect a credit check off the individual, and in turn the provincial council will advise the constituency association if there is any problem in the candidacy. However, outside of that, the selection of candidate is pretty much up to the constituency association. The party can't intervene to block a candidate, nor can the party leader intervene to block a candidate. A party leader can't step in to name a candidate for a constituency association because they think that the name is going to draw votes that a local person might not. And it's another step in our minds in the right direction, in that the local people should be able to vote for their district. Now, in addition to that, the National Council is in charge of reviewing recommendations from the districts on new policies, amended policies, and so on and so forth, and can take appropriate action to deal with them. The provincial council also deals with creating and organizing our conventions. And that's one of the reasons why we have so many people aboard the provincial councils. The provincial council is going to have to create numerous subgroups to deal with all kinds of things, including organization of the conventions, organizing the policies that are going to come forward at convention for member ratification. It's a huge job, and the presidents of the riding associations are going to have to divide up the work amongst themselves so that nobody gets overwhelmed. With 51, potentially 57 members on that board, we have the capacity to do the jobs that the council is tagged with, but bear in mind that the work that the council undertakes is huge, and that is where our constituency associations and district associations all connect. And listen to one another, hear one another's ideas, and come to a consensus as to how the party should proceed into the future.
Yeah, that what you're describing sounds like a very, very connected electorate. Wow. I think Kevin has a question here that he has sent to him.
Yeah, one of the questions I get asked all the time when we're traveling throughout the region here is they say, well, you start a new party, and sure, you've got this constitution, but the fear of the people and the grassroots is that this party can just become corrupt like the other ones, and all of a sudden, before we know it, this party is just like all of the legacy parties out there, and it's a dictatorship from the top. Why can't that happen here, John? I'd like to hear the way you answer this versus the way I answer this.
Okay, fair enough. But in essence, the aim of the Keystone Party is to empower members. And it's risky. Risky in the effect that it's never actually been done before. There have been numerous attempts to form a grassroots party, but if you'll excuse my language, they've always been half-assed in that the people who organize the so-called grassroots party want to remain in charge. And so what you wind up with is, instead of a grassroots party, you wind up with a hybrid of a traditional party at the top and a grassroots at the bottom, and they inevitably fail. You can't do that. You either go all in, which we have done, or you're headed for disaster. You can't operate in the legacy manner and have a grassroots party, because either you empower the members to run things or you don't. That's one of the reasons that our board is elected by districts, so that they're dealing with their people, not with any outsiders. We don't need to go to pollsters and pundits and strategists to set the direction of the party. Because we have heavy member engagement, we're getting all that stuff, but we're not getting a poll of 1,200 people to guide us. We're getting a poll of all the members of the party, and that is highly important.
Wow. That's excellent. Wow. A couple of comments just coming in here, just in response to what you've shared already, John. One person said, the Keystone candidate choosing procedure certainly sounds like the proper way. The constituency holding the authority to appoint their choice and to have it stand is a marked difference to the legacy parties currently. And yeah, that is correct. Another one here is a bit of a question. So if I understand correctly, the constituency associations will be very active in the governance of our province.
Absolutely. That's the basis of a grassroots party. And that members have to feel that if they have a good idea for an amendment to our policies or a better way of doing things, they can put it forward and have it heard. If their if their peers at constituency level agree that they've brought forward a good idea, then it gets forwarded to district council for review by a somewhat broader spectrum of members. Again, we're not talking about it being sent to a group where they may use outside influences. It's reviewed by more of their peers. If it receives support at district level, it moves up to provincial level. And by the time it's approved at district level, it's considered worthy of further consideration, real consideration by the provincial advisory board.
Yeah, excellent. Well, here's another question, and this comes a little bit from our questions, some of the questions we had last week as well, John, and it'd be good to hear from you on this. So last week we had discussed the fact that every member of the legislature, every MLA, would be free to vote according to the views of their constituencies when it comes to votes in the House. And so when it comes to party whips, what does that look like in the Keystone Party? And how do we avoid having to replace the government every time that we have a situation where we don't have enough votes to pass, and we go end up in a place where the government is threatening to fall because we have a divided House? You want to comment on that a little bit, and how the Keystone Party might handle that a little differently?
Well, and I'm going to get you to run that by me one more time, please.
Yeah. So, if in essence, if the Keystone Party is in the House, and say they're in a position where they don't have a majority government,
Right.
and the party members, the MLAs, are free to vote however they like without a whipping of the vote, so to speak. How do you keep from being in a situation where the government falls if you have members of the legislature voting in all different directions?
We don't, and we shouldn't. In essence, the Keystone Caucus is made up of a group of equals. Nobody has more authority than anybody else. The Keystone Party will not form a cabinet per se, although members of the caucus are going to take on critic or minister's roles as called on. And the only reason we do that is so that we can fit into the format of the legislative assembly. But in a practical basis, each individual representative, elected representative, is free to vote in accordance with advice he's got from his constituents and his conscience. And we're not going to stand in the way of that. We don't believe in whip votes. The job of the party whip is to go over the order papers and make sure that members of the Keystone Caucus are briefed beforehand, so when they are in the legislature, they're in a position to know what they're talking about. They've got the briefing papers from the party and can comment knowledgeably.
Excellent. Yeah. So if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying then really is if the legislature was to end up in a situation where you have a whole bunch of differing opinions on a topic, it means that they have to work together as a team and work together consensus to make sure that every constituency association feels that their needs are being represented, and everybody's working towards a compromise for good government that respects and also reflects all aspects of our province, not just one aspect or one constituency over another. Would that be right?
Essentially, yes. And that's one of the reasons why the ultimate authority within the party is the members or member delegates, if we get to that, at convention. They're the people that make the final decision as to how the party is going to operate.
That's excellent. Excellent. All right, another question that we have here is, what is the eligibility for the board of directors? Can anyone apply to be on the board of directors?
Well, certainly, but that has to be done at the district level, as I explained, because it's at district level that we elect representatives to the board of directors.
Yeah, excellent. Another question here. How does this setup that and referring to how our party is structured, how does this setup avoid having a million different regional issues occupying time in the regional districts while the big issues are put on the back burner?
Essentially, it's a self-policing type of thing, in that by arranging to have items that are put on the agenda arrive at or start at the constituency level if they receive support there, moving on to the district level. Then we gradually drop individual suggestions that don't meet with broad approval by the wayside. It doesn't mean that they're dead. They can always be brought back again, perhaps in a different format that is more broadly appealing. But yeah, we're always going to be faced with the problem that someone jumps up and they have a particular axe to grind or something that they personally feel very strongly about that they would like the party to adopt as policy, which may or may not meet with the approval of the broader spectrum of members across the party. Well, we can't give members voice without facing that. It's a little bit like the freedom of speech. If we're going to stand firmly behind the freedom of speech, we know we're going to hear some opinions that upset us, that we're not happy with. But to try to manage that without also destroying our freedom of expression is pretty much impossible. We have to deal with the voices we hear that upset us in a logical and reasoned rebuttal. We've had different individuals that have brought forward proposals that the public finds quite repugnant, and we deal with it. We simply say we don't agree. We will not support you, and it's one of our protections from allowing a few individuals to drive the party in a direction that the majority simply don't support.
Yeah.
You know, when you get to the convention level, and it's unlikely that very bad ideas are ever going to be taken before the convention for approval.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that controversial suggestions won't be put before the convention. They often will be. And having worked on policy at convention level, I know that very often we'll have suggestions from different districts that are aimed at the same idea or at the same issue. They're simply phrased in different language. And you wind up doing a preliminary of which option do you prefer, A, B, or C, because they all effectively say the same thing in different language. Now, which language do you prefer? And then once that's decided, you decide on whether you want to actually adopt this or not.
Yeah. Yeah, that's excellent. It sounds like there's lots of opportunity for engagement at multiple levels, and it also sounds like there's a good series of checks and balances through the interworking of all of the different riding associations and the provincial council, and then also the caucus as well, in helping all of that to flow nicely. So that's excellent.
I come back to one of the statements I made in my preamble, and that's that we tend to underrate and undervalue the common sense of the common people. And if we believe in that, and we do, then we have to accept that, yeah, there's going to be some cockamamie suggestions that come along, but the counter arguments are going to come from that member's peers. And when you broaden into district level and you've got the members from several districts now looking at this, they'll decide whether this is worthy of moving up or not.
Yeah.
So I have confidence in Manitobans. I think they're a great bunch of people, and given the powers to improve our government, they will improve our governance.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. Well, hey, we got another question here. This is interesting because we've had this one, a few different people have talked about this and have mentioned to me. But it says, currently my backbench MLA tells me that she can't do anything in regards to how the government is currently operating. How would that be different with the Keystone Party in government?
Well, again, as far as the Keystone Party is concerned, the individual MLA is not in a position to change how the party approaches issues. That is the members' right. But the members in turn have the right, if they have been hearing from their MLAs that they're frustrated because the party isn't doing whatever, then the constituency association is in a position to craft a resolution for consideration and send it up the line, which eventually is going to wind up in the provincial provincial council basket for dealing with. And the provincial council can make recommendations to the caucus to make some changes. The big difference is that there's no provision in the legacy parties for constituency associations to influence the policies of the party. In the Keystone, the members make the policy.
Yeah, that's really good. So essentially what you're telling us is that caucus, and I think as we get into the last 15 minutes here, I'd really take some time to talk a little bit more about caucus and its operations, and particularly about the choosing of the representatives. But it sounds like we really have a situation and a circumstance here that really lends itself well to having the power to affect change. One of the questions that we got last week was, and I think a little bit of this will lead into where we're going here with the caucus and provincial council, but what would prevent the situation like we had for the last 2 years in Manitoba, where we have the chief medical officer and the premier effectively making a choice to shut down the province completely, and having multiple MLAs, when they're contacted by constituents, saying, sorry, there's nothing I can do about it. The decision's been made by the chief medical officer and by the premier, and we've been told this is the way it's going to be. And the province has been held hostage for 2 years. How is that? How is the Keystone Party different in that? And how could that not have happened with the Keystone Party if the Keystone Party had been in leadership?
One of the huge advantages of the Keystone Party is that provincial council, 51 members, the presidents of all constituency associations. And it's an active, live, working day-to-day life. If we ran into a provincial emergency, and I will admit that COVID was definitely a provincial emergency, then the caucus, who is representing us in government if we're governing, can call on the provincial council for advice as to how best to proceed. More importantly, whatever choice is made as to how we're going to proceed, that can be monitored by the provincial council. And as things proceed and we begin to realize the effect that it's having on the population of Manitoba, how serious the isolation is, who is and isn't losing jobs through this, we can get advice from the council as to how to amend our approach to dealing with this crisis. No party, no other party has that capacity built in. I am absolutely appalled with the way that our federal and provincial governments dealt with COVID. Quite frankly, the provincial ministers of health don't have the lawful power to do what they did. However, that's water under the bridge, and all I can do is tell you how our party would respond to that type of thing. And we would respond by gaining information, accurate information from our broad spectrum of members from right across the province. They in turn can advise us on how to do this with the least impact on the society, with the least impact on society. I wish we had been in power when COVID hit, but we weren't ready then, and won't be ready until we're fully organized and we have all our constituencies and districts in place. But that certainly doesn't block us from planning for the future and building better.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that sounds very encouraging. Well, let's just move into this last part here with this question a little bit about the structure of caucus and the choosing of the leader. And I understand from some of the information that we have released now, there's a very different way that a leader is chosen with the Keystone Party, as well as how the members of cabinet per se would be chosen. In essence, we don't have a cabinet, but we have an executive branch in caucus as well. Could you talk a little bit about that process of the how and the why we would choose to go that route of choosing those people into positions as ministers?
Certainly. The idea is to build a caucus that's an operating team rather than being structured as in the legacy parties. We abhor the idea of having a cabinet, because having a cabinet sets apart some of our representatives as being superior to some of the others. And we don't believe that to be true. One of the dangers of electing a party leader separately from election of the caucus is that you immediately set up a conflict between the leader and some members of the caucus. Bear in mind that when we're looking for representatives, when we're looking for candidates to represent us in the legislature, we're looking for alpha personalities. We're looking for people that are prepared to put their names and put their efforts on the line to represent us properly. If you have a bunch of alphas on your in your caucus, and hopefully we do, because we need to be heard, we need to have our members and the public properly represented, then if you brought in a leader that was separately elected, you automatically have some of the alpha members that feel that they could have done as good or probably a better job than the person that was elected, and you get these internal conflicts going that muddy the waters and prevent the caucus from being fully effective. You can't be effective if you've got internal strife going on. And it's not confined to politics. You see this happen in all kinds of things, like police departments, where the city chooses the chief of police. And so the chief is put into place But he has several deputies that probably have 30 years or more with experience with the department. And this new guy comes in, there's going to be a good deal of resentment involved. And some of them will attempt to undermine the chief on the basis that if we can get rid of him, we've got another shot at the big chip. The same thing happens in fire departments and numerous other bodies where the person is elected or selected from outside. Our approach is to ask the caucus to sit down and decide who amongst them they would like to choose as their leader. Immediately, the leader has the support of the caucus members because they elected him. So he can move forward with confidence and not have to put on a bulletproof vest backwards to represent the party in the public, which is the main job of a leader.
Yeah.
As far as the other positions within caucus, certainly at first, everybody's going to be busy. Some of them will be carrying double jobs as critics of this and that department and so on and so forth. But the caucus members have to decide for themselves who is the most capable. And if we don't have someone capable in a given portfolio, who's willing to take it on? And so they divide the tasks amongst themselves. But it also gives them the strength that if someone's having difficulty in handling a given portfolio, he can come back to his peers and say, look, I'm having a problem in this area. This is the problem. And he can get advice from his peers as to how to best deal with this.
Yeah.
So the teamwork approach, I submit, is going to work vastly better than a situation where we have backbenchers.
Yeah.
There will be no backbenchers in the Keystone party. The guys and girls that are elected to represent us work as equals. They work together. They are there to represent Manitobans, not for any other purpose. They want to provide the best governance that we can for the benefit of Manitobans.
Well, that certainly sounds like a government I would love to see. Well, we're coming on the last couple of minutes here, and I just want to thank everybody for your participation here and for being here tonight. The next town hall is going to be in 2 weeks' time. Won't be next week, because next week we are actually heading to Thompson, where we are actually going to have a physical meeting in the city of Thompson and introducing our interim leader, Kevin Friesen, to the Thompson area, and seeking to get some more signatures and some support from the people up in the Thompson and the northern area. And so, Kevin, why don't you wrap us up here tonight? And just want to thank everybody for their time and their effort. And John, thank you so much for being willing to be here and for all the hard work you've helped to help make this party a success. So.
Yeah, I wanted to thank John specifically. He's given us so much experience. I mean, we could tell Manitoba that we had such a great idea in this constitution, and John really put it in, or helped us put it into some language that everybody is going to be able to understand. But what really makes this party fly, and what we are going to need as membership is we're going to need the genius in every Manitoban. And I want to quote something that Reagan said back in the 60s. I'll read what he said. He said, "Now the path we chart is not an easy one. It demands much of those chosen to govern, but also from those who did the choosing. Let there be no mistake about this. We have come to a crossroad, a time of decision, and the path we'll follow turns away from any idea that those in government, those who serve government, are omnipotent. This path is impossible to follow unless we have the collective wisdom and genius of all of our people." Then he ends off by saying, along this path, the government will lead and not rule, and they will listen and not lecture. And, you know, it almost seems like Reagan had a grassroots idea when he wrote that. That's truly the heart and soul of what we're building here. Yeah, keep us in mind if you have people up in Thompson that would be interested in us. Tell them to check out our website. We're going to be advertising it fairly heavily, so spread the word in Thompson. And if any of you have friends too that haven't signed the petition, we are getting very close, and it'll be nice to get this over this hurdle that we have. And thanks so much for joining us, and thanks, Mike, and I'll turn it over to you to close it off.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Yeah, just one last question here. Somebody's asking how they get a draft copy of the Constitution. Great question. Email info at KeystonePartyMB.ca. That's right, Charlie. Yeah, so info at KeystonePartyMB.ca, and just request a draft copy of the Constitution, and we can make that available. Again, the next town hall will be in 2 weeks' time. If you have enjoyed tonight's content, please pass the information around to your friends and invite them to go to our website, KeystonePartyMB.ca, and sign up there for email notices. If your email is submitted there, then we will make sure that you are on the list to be invited to the town halls that are coming up. And as I said, the next one's in 2 weeks' time. We're going to have some more guests with us in the future as we continue to engage Manitobans and really engage a discussion of what true grassroots democracy could look like in Manitoba. And so, yeah, thanks everybody. Have a great night, and we will see you guys in 2 weeks' time.